The American Freedom Radio Network proudly presents, live from Phoenix, Arizona, The Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, Morgellons disease, and much more. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
Good evening, everyone. It is The Truth Tonight Talk Radio. I am your host, Roxy Lopez. And today, oh boy, this is going to be something. We've got a mixture of energy around this show today. I'll bring our guest on in a moment. And I want to read all of you a letter that a listener wrote into us, and this is also going to have very much to do with the show. We have been getting all of your emails, by the way, with your questions on Facebook and Twitter, etc. And some of you who are going to be calling in. So this is going to be a tremendous informational show, and so just stick around, stick with us through the breaks. Here's the letter I got. It's interesting. I'm going to read it to y'all. It says, in Washington State, indeed most of the western U.S. and even into B.C., Canada, continues to be hammered by massive chemtrail dumps. Not just trails, these are massive dumps all at once like a big blob that then smears out over the whole state. Dozens of them in a day and day out. Day in and day out, sorry. The satellite clearly shows also that what they are doing, and shows how they smear out into the jet streams and prevailing winds and leading winds off of the fronts. The cult of silence and denial runs deep and wide through all of the officialdom, from government to the morons who read the weather, etc. The grip those behind this have on the culture is far-reaching. The numbers of those who remain ignorant and blind and in fear of what their own eyes and minds are telling them, contrasted with the numbers awakening and awake, is incredibly out of balance. Now, this is a listener who wrote it. Now, this is where it really plays into to our guest on the show today. He says, I see a clear pattern. This is, again, the listener. Those not taking any prescription drugs or eating GMO foods and taking measures to detox daily and measures to protect themselves from direct skin contact with the environment seem to be the most awake to me. The sloppier one is doing this seems a direct measure of the captivity to it. Those eating GMO foods, taking prescriptions and over-the-counter drugs, not detoxing and not limiting their environmental contacts and doing nothing to detox their skin seem almost hopelessly captive and lost. The exceptions I have run into statistically has got to be astronomical considering the numbers of people I talk to. In that spectrum, from the fully blind to the fully awake, those capable of acting to further awaken seems in direct measure to how clean they are keeping their bodies. And the talking of so-called legal drugs seems to be where the kill switch to action awareness lies. In other words, the content of the chemtrails and legal drugs and GMO foods clearly seem to me, at least directly and deliberately, connected to the quote-unquote agendas. The listener asks me, are you aware of anyone actively researching these connections? You meet a lot of people, Roxy. Surely you must be aware of the connections and drawing the same conclusions? It is no accident that all three of these areas are being forced upon the public in a big way, like payloads being delivered. So my guest today, this is perfect. By the way, I just received this letter today, so this is so perfect for the show. My guest today is Steve Swan, another controversial individual. Stephen Swan has been studying and using the discoveries, inventions, and protocols of Dr. Hulda Cla for many years to keep himself healthy. He has also used them to cure his own asthma and his own psoriasis. And Swan has a consulting service for anyone wishing assistance in using Dr. Clark's protocols to cure their own ailment or diseases. And Dr. Clark is going to, Stephen Swan is going to, maybe he's the reincarnation of, because Dr. Hulda Cla passed away, but he's going to fill us in on who Dr. Hulda Cla is, what her amazing health discoveries are. He's going to fill us in on all the blanks and why he decided to become a consultant using Dr. Clark's methods. And so without any further ado, very happy to have you on the show. Welcome, Stephen Swan.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice letter. Dr. Clack was so terribly concerned about all of the toxins that everybody is exposed to. We're just inundated with all kinds of toxins that compromise the immune system and allow all kinds of foreign invaders to come into the body and cause all kinds of diseases. And that was a very appropriate letter.
Thank you. And I thought, what a synchronicity, you know. But I go with that. Now, I noticed that with some of what Dr. Clark did, I noticed that she detected RF, radio frequencies, as a poison for people. How long ago was her work in action? In other words, what were the years that she practiced?
Well, she, we refer to her as Dr. Clark, but she wasn't, whenever anyone's referred to as a doctor, you automatically think of a medical doctor. But she was not a medical doctor. She was a classically trained scientist. She did scientific research her whole life. She earned her bachelor's degree in doing scientific research in the biological field. She earned her master's degree. And she earned her PhD, her doctorate, way back in 1958. And so she did that all her life, doing all kinds of scientific research in the biological fields, cellular biology, the physiology of things, how living things function, what things have different effects on how living things function, and so on. And so she had a very strong basis for all of the research she was doing. And I think she should go down in history as one of the greatest scientists that ever lived because of the discoveries she made, which are actively being suppressed by the mainstream pharmaceutical industry, the mainstream medical industry. She made some tremendous discoveries that have the potential of positively affecting the life of every person alive. After she got her degrees, she worked in scientific research for a while, doing government-funded investigations. And she also, being involved in the biological sciences, she was interested in her own health, staying healthy, and the health of her family and friends. And so she did a lot of research into what causes ailments, what causes diseases, and helping people out. And she pretty much came up with the concept that she determined that most diseases are simply a combination of two factors: an overabundance of toxins and pollutants coming into the body and compromising the immune system, which in turn would allow foreign invaders, bacteria, viruses, parasites, all kinds of different things to be able to colonize in the body and form different, start different types of ailments and diseases. So, because she was interested in curing these things, one of the things she found out was that if you find out what the source of the toxins and pollutants are and stop that from coming into your body will do a good job of clearing a lot of the toxins and pollutants out itself. But a lot of times it won't be able to do that completely. So sometimes other methods are needed to get the toxins and pollutants out of the body. And as far as getting rid of the foreign invaders in the body, she was very involved with herbs, using herbal remedies to exterminate things. And so she worked in her regular job doing research, and she also kind of had a side job of helping people with their ailments. So she built up quite a reputation around where she lived. She lived in Indiana. She was originally from Canada, But when she started doing her actual work after she got her doctorate, she was living in Indiana. And so word got around the area she was living that she could cure ailments, cure diseases. So she had a lot of people coming to her. Her first patient she saw as a consultant was way back in 1963, and she just kept doing it and doing it and doing it for years and built up quite a name for herself. Eventually, because she was not a medical doctor, but she knew that she could help people, she was probably a little concerned about being prosecuted for practicing medicine without a license. So she ended up moving to California, and I think her intention was to eventually go across the border into Mexico and set up a clinic there. So she helped a lot of people. She continued doing all of her research, acting as a scientist, working as a scientist, getting better and better at it, helping people cure their ailments and diseases. But what happened was in 1988, she made her most important discovery. Now, you mentioned earlier that something about RF radio frequencies causing diseases, but that's not what that's not what happened. What she discovered was the radio frequencies, the RF, weren't causing diseases. She discovered that everything that's in existence, whether it's dead or alive, animate, inanimate, everything produces and emits its own radio frequency or a range of radio frequencies. The smaller things are, the lesser number of frequencies they have, and the larger things are, the larger the range of frequency is. And so she came up with an invention for being able to detect radio frequencies and being able to figure out what the substance was just based on what the radio frequencies it was emitting. So she could test a person using her invention with radio frequencies to see exactly what the toxins were that were in the body, exactly what the foreign invaders were that were in the body, and she could also pinpoint the exact locations in the body where these toxins and foreign invaders were colonized. And so, and her invention, this opened up a whole new field of analytical research, being able to detect substances and figure out what is causing the diseases and how to cure them. But you know, the way the medical industry is set up, it's a lot of it is guided by the large pharmaceutical companies, and you know they make a lot of money, and they don't want to hear about new, inexpensive ways of being able to cure things naturally by removing the toxins and by exterminating the foreign invaders. So there was a big concerted effort to suppress a lot of the evidence that she was presenting. Now, she was a scientist, and she knew that the way things are traditionally done is if a new scientific discovery is made, then it's put out for peer review for all the other scientists, and clinical trials are done, double-blind studies where you have a control group and you have another group, and one group will get the actual substance that's supposed to help, and the other group will get a placebo, and they go on for years and years, and the group getting the placebo, they may die from whatever the ailment is that they're studying, and the other group may get some benefit from it. Well, she didn't want to have to wait all this time. She made these important revolutionary discoveries. She wanted to get that information into people's hands as quickly as possible. So she figured the best way to do that would be to write books. Just put everything, all of her discoveries, she would just put them into books and put it out there into the general public so people could learn and benefit and cure themselves. So after she made this discovery in 88, you know, she went a couple of years and did all kinds of research and using this new method of analytical research that she had done. And then in the early 90s, she started publishing books. And the disease that concerned her the most was cancer, because so many people were dying from cancer. So she wrote a book in 1993 called The Cure for All Cancers. And in the same year, she was also very concerned about people dying from AIDS. So she wrote a book in 1993, same year, called The Cure for HIV and AIDS. But, there was very basic information as how to cure cancer, how to cure AIDS, and these diseases are so complicated that she kept doing her research, and she did end up setting up a clinic in Mexico for cancer patients. It was mostly for people who the mainstream medical establishment had pretty much given up hope on, had sent them to hospice, saying there's nothing more we can do for you. And so that was the type of patients that she would take into her clinic in Mexico. And so she spent a lot of time analyzing the people and seeing exactly what the problem was and providing protocols for them to follow to get better, and then doing analysis to make sure that the protocols were working, and continuing to do her research. And she was always she was a workaholic. She worked. It was like 7 days a week. She was always working, doing her research. She felt like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders because these people were dying. They were looking to her to save them, so she wanted to do everything she could to save them. Plus, she wanted to get the information out to as many other people to help. And so she was very busy and always updating her information. Now, in 1995, she had amassed all this material, and so she wanted to help people with other diseases too. So she wrote a book called The Cure for All Diseases, where she went through, I can't say she went through every single disease, but she went through a whole litany of hundreds of diseases and talked about what the causes, what are the toxins that cause these diseases, what are the foreign invaders that are involved with this, how do you go about curing it? So that was 1995. She kept on doing her research over the years, working with all her patients. In 1999, she had amassed more information about cancer, so she updated her cancer book, and she wrote a new book called The Cure for All Advanced Cancers. She kept on doing her research, and this time, this is when she started writing her book, she started getting really popular, and this is when the mainstream medical establishment started coming out and really going against her and trying to vilify her and her work and her inventions.
I mean, after all those books. Listen, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about what happened next with Dr. Hulda Cla. We're speaking with Stephen Swan. You're listening to the Truth Tonight Talk Radio. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the world's meeting place. American.
It's practically narcotic.
Freedom.
Oh, yes. I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back to the show. We have Steve Swan on with us. We're talking about Dr. Hulda Cla. I want to let you know, too, that the phone lines are open, and I think you need to step in line on that one. It's 218-339-8525 if you want to call in, 218-339-8525 for questions. Seems like a lot of you have some questions, so we're going to go on. Steve, I was going to ask you about something. When you were speaking about the RF, the radio frequencies, that Dr. Hulda Cla had discovered that everything emits an RF, including, I'm assuming that you were including humans. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so my next question is, this is where it gets a little tricky. For me too, right now, because there's a huge activism out in the world right now that are fighting against cell phones, smart meters, cell phone towers because of these RF frequencies, and that goes for home phones and televisions and the whole nine yards. So, are they fighting the wrong fight? I mean, are RF? That's a little bit confused about that radio frequencies are just basically a part of like all living or non-living beings on the planet. And if that's the case, why are activists fighting against, wanting to reduce RF frequencies?
I think as far as the RF frequencies that are being put out by the different products, and accumulating and affecting affecting the body or whatever. I think we're talking two different things. I think the RFs that are naturally produced by everything in existence, and something doesn't even have to be ever have been alive to emit a radio frequency. I think the accumulation of RFs that are put out by these other devices that everyone is so concerned about are in a different range, and I think we're talking about two different things. I think the RF that everything in existence emits naturally is something entirely different than the RFs that the other people are concerned about.
Okay, and I can. Now, that helped me out a lot, especially when you said in the range. There's different ranges of the frequencies. Right. So then it would make sense if we were getting inundated by these frequencies that are not only artificial, they're not produced organically by the planet. I think it's the name radio frequency, just the implication sounds like something artificial, radio frequency, to most people, most people. And I think that's where it's probably needs to be a discernment there. I'm really glad I asked the questions, because I knew that the listeners are going to be writing in and saying, what's he talking about? And that's going to throw everybody off right there. So thanks for clarifying that. I really appreciate it. Now, when you were we left off with in 1990, I believe 5. Dr. Clark had the cure for all diseases, and then 1996 was it the next year that she came out with cure for all advanced cancers?
No, that wasn't until 1999. She updated her cancer book.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay, so she had quite a few books out there, Detecting RF, Cure for HIV and AIDS, Cure for All Diseases, and that brings me to another question, and then we can move on. We can go further into, you're obviously charting her past very well. Thank you for all of us. But it does bring up the question as well, when she said cure for all diseases, the book. Does that imply, did that book, because I didn't read the book, unfortunately, but did that book imply that the same methods can be used for all diseases, because perhaps all diseases come from the same place?
No. Well,
Systemic.
Not really. What it implies is the way the medical establishment is set up now is they treat the symptoms of disease, and it's very profitable to do that. What Dr. Clark was more interested in was finding the actual cause of the disease. That once you find the cause and you can remove the cause, then you can actually cure the disease and not just treat the symptoms of the disease. So they're all the same in the instance that you're finding the cause of the disease, but there's all kinds of different causes of all kinds of different diseases. They're not. It's not the same. You can't cure all diseases the same way, but you just have to find the particular cause of each disease. And once you find that, which she went through most diseases, and she came up with the causes. Like
okay.
And
thank you. I definitely want to bring us back to that question again, another level of it. But in 1999, the cure for all advanced cancers, and you were about to say something before the break. So you want to finish what you were going to be talking about there?
Well, I was just going to talk about the major diseases that we have. Like for cancer, she found that there's a particular toxin, that she found this early on, that there's a particular toxin which is very ubiquitous, isopropyl alcohol, regular rubbing alcohol, which compromises the immune system, especially of the liver. And once the liver is compromised, it allows a particular parasite to colonize in the liver, which can start the cancer process, and then the cancer can start anywhere in the body. It doesn't have to the cancer doesn't have to start in the liver. But what she found was every person who gets cancer, the genesis of it is a particular parasite that has colonized the liver and allows cancer to start somewhere else in the body. For AIDS, she found that the particular toxin is benzene, which is a byproduct of petroleum. And I should say the isopropyl alcohol in cancer one of the reasons that cancer is so prevalent is because isopropyl alcohol is so prevalent. In a lot of our food manufacturing and beverage manufacturing, there's all kinds of vats and pipes and containers involved, and they have to clean them. And a lot of times, one of the things that they use for a cleaning agent is isopropyl alcohol. So we get traces of it in a lot of our foods and beverages and water and things. Even bottled water has traces of the isopropyl alcohol in there. And so that was one of the things she found was why cancer was so widespread. In later years, she found other things that contributed to it as well, but her earlier findings found that isopropyl alcohol was the toxin involved with cancer. Benzene, the petroleum product, and there's so much petroleum around, a lot of it gets into our food and water supplies too, and that would compromise the thymus gland, which is under the breastbone. And it was the same parasite that causes cancer also causes AIDS. The first parasite for cancer goes into the liver. The parasite for AIDS goes into the thymus gland. For diabetes, there's a particular toxin. Wood alcohol, another name for it is methanol. And what that does is it compromises the pancreas. And allows a different type of parasite to colonize in the pancreas. So she found that of the major diseases, there's a particular toxin which compromises a certain organ, which allows a foreign invader to go in there and colonize it, which starts the disease. And once you find out what is causing the things, you can find the sources. That's another thing she could do with her diagnostic tool for frequencies, radio frequencies. She could figure out where the source was. She could identify the source and figure out how to prevent it from coming into the body. So she kept up with her research over the years, and she did write a number of books, but she wrote even more books. Continuing on and always coming up. I mean, it's amazing. Her books are so thorough, and there's so much information in there, and it's just amazing how complicated everything is. By 2003, she had amassed enough information to update her HIV and AIDS book, so she did that. In 2004, she updated the cancer book again with a book entitled The Prevention of All Cancers. And then shortly after that was another astounding breakthrough that she never really thought of in doing all of her research and looking for toxins, looking for foreign invaders. She never really thought that radioactivity would be one of the major sources of people getting cancer. But a friend of hers, his wife had lung cancer, and he had a Geiger counter. And one day, he used the Geiger counter close to his wife, and the Geiger counter went nuts with radioactivity. And so he contacted Dr. Cla about it and says, "Have you ever looked into this?" And so she started going to some of her patients and checking them and some of her old records and everything, and she realized that radioactivity is also a major player in the cause of cancer. Now, the typical cancer research, they've been searching and searching and searching for the cause of cancer, but they all are looking for one particular cause. They try this. This isn't in 100% of all cases. They try something else. This isn't not in 100% of all cases. They try something else. They try something else. They've been going for decades and decades. They've come up with all of these potential carcinogens. These things do cause cancer in some instances, but they haven't found something that causes cancer in 100% of the cases. And Dr. Clark always said that it's because they're going about it the wrong way. It's not one particular thing. It's very complicated. She came up with, in her last book, there's a compilation of 5 or 6 different things, all in conjunction with each other, reacting to each other, which is the cause of cancer. And that led to her final book, with the radioactivity discovery, realizing that the radioactive element, a particular radioactive element, a daughter of uranium called polonium, is in every person that has cancer has this radioactive element in it. That radioactive element reacts with another element, which connects to another element, and it's this chain of events which causes cancer. Now, another thing Dr. Clark discovered was she knew that cancer is so prevalent. I mean, they're talking now that people born today have a 1 in 2 chance of developing cancer. 50% of the people are eventually going to develop cancer at the rate we're going. So she said, because it is so prevalent, it has to be in one of our major, something that everybody comes in contact with. It either has to be in the air, it has to be in the water, it has to be in our food. So she set out to discover exactly where is the source. Why are so many people getting cancer? And what she came up with, there is a particular type of a chemical which is in the water. And that is why so many people are getting cancer. And where it comes from is most people's water, municipal water, city water, is disinfected with chlorine gas, which is fine. There's no problem with chlorine gas. And so the water gets disinfected. It goes out through the city, out through the town, travels through miles and miles of water pipes, and then it gets ready to go out into your homes or your businesses. But before it goes to your home or your business, it goes. There's another pumping station involved to keep the pressure built up, and they're allowed to boost the chlorine level in the water before it goes to your home or business. And the way they do that is they use liquid chlorine. Now, there's a specific type of chlorine that's supposed to be used, liquid chlorine, which is past National Sanitation Foundation stringent requirements for safety, and that's what's supposed to be used at the last pumping station. But at a lot of places, what they do is somehow the word got out that, hey, liquid chlorine is liquid chlorine. Bleach is bleach, so it doesn't matter if you use this specified type of bleach or if you use just regular Clorox bleach or any type of laundry bleach. So a lot of the water supply has been contaminated with laundry bleach, which has this particular type of a chemical in it. It's a cyanide chemical that for some reason is in there. And she determined that is one of the reasons, one of the chain of things that are connected with each other that causes everyone's cancer and why cancer is so prevalent.
Is that right? That's actually amazing. And, Steve, we've had some callers just getting backed up here on the line. So would you mind if we took one before we go to a break?
No, that's fine.
Okay, great. Thanks. And of course, we'll continue on to in linear fashion with what you're describing as well. Welcome to the show, caller. You're on line with Steve Swan.
Hi, Roxy. My name's Jesse. I'm from Sacramento, California. And I have a question
Jesse.
for Steve. I understand that Dr. Clark had worked with Dr. Bob Beck. And Dr. Bob Beck was instrumental in working with the U.S. military and in discovering the woodpecker signal. My question is, Roxy, and you mentioned earlier that radio frequencies can be detected from the human body. What type of device is being utilized in order to detect those types of frequencies?
Well, what Dr. Clark did was she invented this device. The way she came about it in the first place was as a scientist. She's a very curious person, very interested in her research as far as how living things function, the physiology of things. But she also had a hobby of amateur radio, ham radio, and learning all about radio frequencies, the electromagnetic spectrum, and different things. And so she came up. She adapted a Radio Shack type of electronics kit, and because of her curiosity with electromagnetic spectrum, she adapted this one of the experiments in the electronics kit, so that what happens is you have two different plates.
So we're back, the Truth Tonight Talk Radio, and we are speaking with Stephen Swan, and I hope the caller held in there. And Stephen, I want to just say, so sorry, we had a little screw up there. We just all got cut out and went to commercial. So you were just answering the caller's question, so the audience didn't get to hear this either. So you were just answering this device. I believe that the caller's question was what sort of device was being used to pick up the RF signal, and you were describing the last thing I heard, Steve, is that you were saying about Dr. Hulda Cla put together something, a little device from like Radio Shack or something, and could use it to pick up frequencies. And I think that's where we were. And what was the device called, I guess, as well?
Okay, the device was an adaptation of a Radio Shack electronics kit for scientific studies for people that wanted to get something from Radio Shack. I think this device has the potential for changing the world. Supposedly, according to Dr. Clark, this is many thousands and thousands of times more accurate and more sensitive than anything currently being used by mainstream scientific study. She named it, what her adaptation was, she named it a syncrometer, SYNCROMETER. And if anybody wanted to be on the cutting edge wave of being able to analyze substances, analyze anything in the future, I think it'd be wise to learn how to use a syncrometer. And it's in her book. She explains how to use it. But the way it works is you have you have an electronic device, and it has two separate metal plates. And so if you put a substance on one of the plates, it can be in a bottle or it can be a microscopic slide or whatever, and you put another substance on the other plate, there's also, as part of the device, there's a speaker, a radio speaker there. If the two are in synchronicity with each other, then you will get feedback out of the speaker. And so you can if you're looking for a toxin, you can put a sample of a toxin on one of the plates, and you can take a saliva sample from a person that might be on a paper towel, put into a baggie, put that on the other plate. You will be able to tell, not in one per part per million or part per billion, but parts per trillion, or maybe even quadrillion. I'm not exactly sure how sensitive it is. I know the terms of thousands of times more sensitive has been used, and I think I almost heard somebody say 1,000,000 times more sensitive than anything currently in use. But it will be able to detect whether or not that toxin is in that saliva sample or whatever you want to test. You could put a sample of anything onto the metal plates, and it'll be able to detect whether or not that sample is in there. You'll get feedback out of the speaker if the frequency of the one thing matches the frequency of the other thing, something that's in that other substance that you're testing. And so that's the way the analytical device works.
Okay, got that, and thanks. And caller, did that answer your question for you?
Yeah, that did answer my question. So it wasn't like she was scanning the human body. She was actually taking samples and then listening to the audio output of whatever the frequency emission was.
Right. But you could do a saliva sample of someone, or you could actually test the person right there in person as well. As part of the system, what there is a loop that goes through the electronic system that has two wires coming out of it, which you actually put yourself into the loop. You hold on to, there's a copper handhold that you hold in one hand, and then you have a blunt metal probe you hold in the other hand, and you press it against your finger, and so that connects the loop. And if you get the feedback, that'll tell you that that substance that's on the plate is in the other is in whatever you're testing for. So you can do it with an actual person being there. You can actually test a person being right there present, or you can do a saliva sample from somebody who's 10,000 miles away. You know.
Sure, and we've got another caller, let's see, Jesse, did you want to stay on, or are you happy with your answers?
I do have one more question, but you can take one more caller if it's okay.
We'll keep you on, and hold on just a second, and we'll see if we caller. Let's see, I don't know where you're calling from. It's anonymous, but anyway, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? I'm using Skype to call, so it wouldn't show my number.
That's fine. And you have a question for Steve Swan.
Well, I just tuned in right now, so I'm just trying to figure out what everybody's talking about. I was trying to call for actually another reason. There's another guest of yours, Starscream, Danny Whitten. He's on YouTube right now, giving my avatar PsyOps agent with a 0. He's given like a death threat.
Sir, hold on just a moment. Are you calling the wrong show right now?
No, this is, I just called the American Freedom Radio because I got this Starscream guy who's on, who brags about being on your show, and he won't answer a legitimate question. He's giving me death threat. Well, not on American Freedom Radio. He's always bragging about
Freedom Radio, sir. American Freedom Radio. We have 13 hosts, so
yeah. Okay.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no idea who you're talking about, and I'd love to direct you, but I have no clue as to what you're talking about right now. Okay.
That's fine. I get that, but if you got a number for your main office or something, I'd like to call them because this guy's giving me death threats over the internet. He's saying, push PsyOp agent, push PsyOp agent, pop his little skull.
I don't. And, you might just want to go to the American Freedom Radio website, and all the contact information is there, okay?
Okay, I'm looking at that now. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks. Okay, guys, sorry about that. That's something new. All right. So distracting, isn't it? So you had another question, Mr. Jesse. You had another question for Steve Swan. So go ahead.
Yeah. So she was. It sounds to me she was analyzing for diseases, and you spoke about cancer. In the same token, I've heard studies and have heard experts say that exposure to RF or radio frequencies can cause cancers, and in some cases can even elicit medical ailments. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything. I mean, she talked a lot about radio frequencies as far as doing analysis. She boiled down the exact combination of things it takes to cause cancer. Radio frequencies, she didn't. I mean, there's radioactivity, a certain type of radioactivity was one of the things that she had pinpointed as one of the causes of cancer. But, I mean, there's so many different theories out there as to what causes cancer that it wouldn't be unusual for people to think that radio frequencies were involved with causing cancer. As far as what she came up with, for the combination, it didn't mention anything about radio frequencies being the cause of it. Now, there may be something with a certain type of something in the spectrum, in the electromagnetic spectrum, the radio spectrum, which may affect organs or may affect tissue or things like that. That may have some type of involvement there. But as far as her research into coming up with the exact combination of things that cause cancer, she didn't include that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you for calling. Thank you. And so there you have it. You know, obviously there's a lot of different directions. I'm glad the caller seemed to be quite intelligent about this, so I'm grateful that he actually called. Now, back in line with what we were talking about, the 2006 that she did a prevention of prevention of all cancers. I think we're getting really deep down the rabbit hole with this radio frequency stuff. So I think a lot of the listeners are going to be sort of, their head's going to be spinning right now. So maybe we need to move away from that, being that we're talking about spectrometry at this point, and mass spectrometry, and now we're going so deep into the scientific analytical data. Why don't we come back to Earth just a little bit, though I do appreciate what you're doing, Steve. Obviously, you had a caller who knew what you were talking about. Why don't we talk about what happened from there in 2006 after the release of the Prevention of All Cancers book, and the obviously she set up a clinic in Mexico and began to help others. We'll answer that question right when we get back from the break. This is the Truth Tonight Talk Radio. I'm Roxy Lopez. Don't turn that dial. So welcome back. We're at the top of the hour. We have an hour left with Stephen Swan talking about, Dr. Hulda Clark's famous work. And for those of you who want to call in, it's 218-339-8525. And, feel free to call in. So, Steve, we were just going to talk about, what came next, between 2006 and when did Dr. Hulda Clark pass away?
She passed away in September of 2009.
I see. So we were just getting into her last years as well, and of her work. What happened next after she, actually discovered, how to basically cure, or heal, all cancers, or prevention of all cancers? What happened next?
Well, actually, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up another segment that involved radio frequency, something that's a very important part of it. We've got the device that she used, which I believe is her most important discovery, was being able to analyze substances and identify substances based upon the radio frequencies that they emit. Now, that just opened up a whole new world of being able to figure out what is causing the problems. Another thing she realized was, I had spoken earlier about all diseases being pretty much a combination of toxins compromising the immune system, and then foreign invaders being able to take advantage of the immune system being compromised and being able to colonize certain parts of the body. Another thing that Dr. Clark discovered was she knew what the radio frequency or the range of radio frequencies were for the virus or for the bacteria or for the parasite that was causing the problem. She knew what the radio frequencies were. She could identify them by those radio frequencies. She also discovered that if she took a radio frequency generator and she put out the signal that would match what the radio frequency of the foreign invader was, if she subjected that foreign invader to its own radio frequency via a radio frequency generator, she could kill the foreign invader, the virus or the bacteria or the parasite. So that is probably what she's known for most, rather than the being able to analyze things and detect things with radio frequencies, is to be able to exterminate the pathogens and the parasites that are causing the problems. Now it got a little tricky. She was also using herbs to exterminate things, but she started experimenting with using the radio frequencies to exterminate the pests, the problem makers. Now, some of these things, the smaller ones, they only have viruses. They might only have one frequency, but the larger ones, a virus can fit inside of a bacteria, and a bacteria can fit inside of a parasite. And so the parasite, you started getting into a range of frequencies. So she would have to set the frequency generator at these different ranges in order to be able to fully exterminate and go through the whole range of it.
Okay, and you bring up something. Steve, you do bring up something interesting when you're talking about the virus can be into this and be into that, and which I'd like to ask you. I just have to ask you,
okay.
Like the H5N1 virus, that's the bird flu. Is that sort of what you're talking about? Like, in other words, did she find out that there were synthetic viruses that were going on that weren't natural for the human body, besides the toxicity or the range of RF signals? Did she ever discover that there were also modified lethal viruses that were man-made, like the H5N1?
She talked about the bird flu, the different viruses. I don't think she ever mentioned them being synthetic. She didn't know whether that they were synthetic, but she did talk about viruses and that some of the remedies for a regular type of flu would not work on this new type of a bird flu or other type of flu. So she did get into that somewhat. But as far as being able to fit inside of each other, I think it was just more or less generally speaking that viruses are very, very tiny, and just because they're so tiny, it doesn't matter which virus, they're just very tiny, and they just generally speaking, viruses can fit inside of bacteria, and bacteria can fit inside of larger parasites.
Okay, gotcha. And Steve, not to interrupt your train of thought, but would you like to take another call?
Oh, if I could just finish this one part.
Go for it.
Okay, so what happened was she wanted to use a frequency generator to exterminate these foreign invaders. But, if somebody came into her and she tested them with her machine to figure out what was causing the problem, she might see 5 or 10 different types of viruses or bacteria or parasites in there that she would have to deal with a frequency generator. So between the time of testing to actually using the generator, you have to set the frequency on each one and let it run for a 3-minute time period in order to kill whatever's in that range. It could take a couple of hours for someone to be to get a treatment using the frequency generator. Then her son tried using a computer-controlled system where they took all of the range of all the viruses and bacteria and parasites, real low ranges up to the higher range. So there might have been 1,000 different frequencies there that they wanted to use. So the computer would set it up, but the computer would stay on each frequency for 3 minutes, and then go to the next frequency, the next higher frequency, the next higher frequency. But it was it was taking hours and hours to be able to go through this whole range. So they in the meantime, the son tried to because this frequency generation was working. The son came up with a portable device to try to make it more affordable. A frequency generator might be $200, $300, $400. They were trying to make it more affordable for people to be able to use frequency in order to kill foreign invaders. So he came up with a battery-operated device. And what happened was they used it. Dr. Cla got out her analytical device to test to see if the pathogen that they were targeting had been killed, and she realized that not only had that one been killed, but a whole bunch of other ones had been killed as well. And what they figured out was this handheld portable device that runs on a 9-volt battery was putting out a certain kind of a radio wave. It was putting out a square wave, but it had to be totally positive, and so it didn't matter what the frequency was. As long as it was putting out this particular wave, that would kill a whole range of different viruses and bacteria and parasites. So this was the invention that Dr. Cla is most famous for. She called it a zapper. And you just put in on the internet Hulda Cla zapper, and you'll see all kinds of hits on her most important device. So I just thought I should bring that up. I think her analytical device using radio frequencies was the most important because that opened up this whole field of being able to cure diseases. But the zapper was also a very important device.
I did have some questions about a couple of things, and I'm glad that you did bring up the Clark zapper, and my audience is very familiar with that. And let's give an opportunity for some of the audience that are all hanging on the phone lines here a chance to ask you a question. So, Massachusetts, you're on the air with Stephen Swan, and do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, how are you doing tonight?
Good.
Excellent, thank you.
Well, fascinating subject. I absolutely agree that frequency plays a part in everything on this planet, especially harmonics and timing, and of course you obviously know that there's a certain harmonic tune or tone of the earth It makes a particular intonation, its own harmonic signature. Are you aware of that? Have you heard of that before?
Yes, I've heard of it some, but I'm not very familiar with it.
Well, it's a very real phenomenon, and I find it fascinating. And so I partially agree with what you're saying with healing through frequency, because each being, each entity or energetic thing has resonance, has frequency, has sound, a certain a tone, a tone to the cosmos. I could, get ethereal if you want me to.
Do you have a question other than the? I think you're talking about the hertz and the megahertz and the heartbeat of the planet and things like that, and the synchronicities that go around that. So I definitely am familiar with that, and I think Steve's probably familiar with that as well. But I think what his devotion has been to the work, which is very, very justifying, very validating, caller, because basically everything is energy. I think that would be safe to say. Would you agree with that as well, Steve Swan?
Yeah, I would.
Great. And as far as what you were, getting into when you were talking about the zapper, now, are you familiar with Rife frequency?
I've heard of it. I've looked into it somewhat. Some people have tried to connect what Dr. Clark came up with what Royal Rife came up with. I don't think there's a lot of connection there between the two. I know Dr. Clark was very aware of Rife's work, but like the last show I was on, somebody had called in and had said that they were pretty much the same thing, and I don't think that's quite true. I looked into some of Rife's work to try to figure out a little bit about what the basis of it was, but I don't think it was quite the same as Dr. Clark's.
Okay, and then as far as the zapper, a lot of people write in our organization about the zapper, and I think that would be a natural topic to go to, because zappers are still being sold today. You know what I mean? There are different people who sell zappers, and from what I understand, without getting too technical, there are different types of zappers. So, are you familiar with the different types of zappers?
Well, the ones who follow Dr. Clark, it's all the same. I mean, she did come up with a different type of zapping, where the way the zapper works, the original zapper, is it puts out a radio frequency wave, and you have two wires coming out of it, a positive and a negative, which go to copper handholds. You hold one in each hand, and the radio waves will come out of the device, come into your body. You can't feel it, and it'll travel through your body, through your liquids, your blood and your lymph. And what you do is you zap for 7 minutes. Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting. I talked about earlier that viruses are very tiny. They can fit inside of bacteria. Bacteria are small. They can fit inside of parasites. Well, what happens is Dr. Clark realized that 7 minutes would pretty much kill any of the foreign pathogens that you had, unless there are certain parts of the body that get shielded from the radio waves. So that's why she also used a lot of very powerful herbs to kill foreign invaders as well. But what happens is the parasite would be killed by the 7 minutes worth of zapping. But when the parasite dies, a bacteria may emerge from it. And so you may get sick. If you only zap for 7 minutes, you might get sick from that bacteria. It might be a salmonella bacteria or some other type of bacteria, E. coli bacteria. You could get sick from a bacteria coming out of the parasite that you had just killed.
Right.
So the way that the zapper was set up originally was that you would zap for 7 minutes, then you would wait for 20 minutes, then you would zap again for another 7 minutes to kill any bacteria that might have emerged from the parasite. But then you might have viruses which might have emerged from the bacteria. So a cold virus or a flu virus or something like that. So that might make you ill. So you'd have to wait another 20 minutes and then zap a third time for another 7 minutes in order to be able to be comfortably safe that you weren't going to get ill from releasing something you hadn't intended to release. Now, Dr. Cla came up with another way of zapping by adding the same type of plates that are used on her analytical device, putting a sample, an organ sample or a parasite sample or whatever on the plates, and being able to direct, rather than the radio waves going through the whole body, by putting it on the plate, she called it plate zapping, she could direct the radio waves directly to that organ, so that organ would get the whole radio wave, and that particular parasite sample that she put on the plate would be the only thing that would be zapped. So there was a way to direct the zapping too. So that's the two different type of zapping that I know about, is what she came up with, the original and her variation on that, as far as being able to direct the zapping.
Mm-hmm. And when the zapper came out, just on that note, and other people have manufactured it, obviously, I just wanted to be clear. Like, for instance, yourself, do you sell zappers at all?
No, I don't sell. There's so many other people that are selling them out there. I just got into this myself. I mean, I've been following Dr. Cla for a long time. I've read her books numerous times. I've been using her protocols to keep myself healthy. But as far as trying to promote her and getting exposure for her, I've only started doing this relatively recently. So I know there's a lot of people out there selling zappers, so I just didn't want to be another person trying to do that to compete with everyone else.
Right. I would like to know what happened to you personally, because I know that you had a couple of ailments that you healed yourself 100% by use of Dr. Clark's methods, correct?
Yes, I was able to cure my own asthma after suffering from that for 57 years. I was able to cure my own psoriasis after suffering from for 34 years. A lot of... I had mentioned earlier that her major emphasis was in cancer.
Right. Hey, just hold that thought, and then we'll definitely get into that right when we come back to the break. This is The Truth Tonight. We are speaking with Stephen Swan. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Stephen Swan, and don't worry, Johnny from Montreal, we'll get to you, and the others behind you, we'll get right to you. I just think that Stephen needed to finish a statement, and you were just starting to talk about the cancer, and you go ahead and finish that thought, Steve.
Yeah, what I was starting to talk about was that I had been able to cure a couple of my own ailments. Like I said, Dr. Cla had pretty much focused on cancer.
Yes.
Most of her books were about how to cure cancer, how to prevent cancer. And when she would get more material, she would write another book to share that with people, which brought us to her last book that she published was in 2007, and that's called The Cure and Prevention of All Cancers. Now, I had asthma and I had psoriasis, and she had written a book way back in '95 about curing diseases other than cancer. And but her cancer books, there were a lot of things in her updated books, in her cancer books, her newer books, which were applicable to other diseases as well. You could use some of these treatments and some of these protocols and be able to help other diseases. So I had tried earlier using her asthma cure and her psoriasis cure, and it may have been because I hadn't actually cleansed my body as well as I should have. Because you get accumulations of metals and dyes and toxins and things like that. And if you really have the time to do it, you can pinpoint it and really work on cleansing all these things. And I hadn't done that at that point. Like I said, it's been relatively recently that I've only been working on promoting her, even though I have been using a lot of her stuff generally for quite a while. So anyway, her cure for asthma in the other book, and And psoriasis was I mean, it helped quite a bit, but it didn't actually cure. And I think it was my own fault for not going through as she had recommended. But I noticed in her last book that she wrote that there was something in there which should be able to work to cure the asthma. So I tried it, and what I had to do was I had to send away for a certain type of supplement, and I got it, and I tried it for a few days, and within a few days my asthma was gone. It was the first time that had happened in 57 years. And then I realized that psoriasis was related to asthma in a certain way, and that the same type of cure might work on the psoriasis too. So I tried. I had to get a different type of. Actually, what you can do is you can target certain areas of your body. So for my asthma, I had to get the substance and target it to my lungs, and then for my psoriasis, there was a certain type of parasite involved. I had to find out. I had to get analyzed to find out where it was colonizing in my body. Come to find out, it was colonizing in my spinal cord fluid. And so I was able to target this substance to go after the parasite that was there, and within a few days my psoriasis had cleared up, it was cured.
Which
so
is
what
really
I did
quick. You're talking about a few days for, and I'm assuming that you mean complete healing, like you've never had a reoccurrence of any of this.
Right? No. Well, I mean, it's been over a year now for both of them, and
isn't that
been
something?
No recurrence. So what I did was I wanted to share this mostly with other people that were familiar with Clark's information, but her books contain so much information that. It's just sometimes it gets a little confusing trying to sort it all out. So I wrote up the exact protocol for people who were familiar with Clark's work, and I set up a website called ClarkUpdates.com, and on there I have it all written out for the cure for asthma, the cure that I use for my psoriasis. It also works on eczema, and I know it works on psoriasis and asthma because I did it to myself. It should also work on the eczema because I think that's the same causation. And it should also work on people who have seizures and epilepsy because I think...
Is that right?
So what I did was I wrote them all up. I put it on the website, ClarkUpdates.com, and I figured, well, this is for people who are already familiar with Clark's work, and they'll be able to read it and just realize that she had never updated her 1995 book, The Cure for All Diseases, so this was kind of like an update to that book. So I've got them on there. They're only $19.95, which is probably very, very cheap. If you can cure asthma, people die from asthma. Pardon me?
And that's on ClarkUpdates.com?
Clark's, with an S.
Clark's
Update.
Updates.
Yeah.
Okay, great, and we'll have a video of this show, by the way, Steve. So all the information, all of your contact information for the public, and we'll do an article as well. Now,
wait a second. I was wrong. It's not Clark's. It's Clark. You were right the first time. Clark.
I am right. That's what I heard you say. ClarkUpdates.com. Correct?
I got confused a little bit there.
That's all right. Me too. Let's take this caller because we have so many people that are interested in this topic. So let's go ahead and take a call. Johnny from Montreal, welcome to the show. You're with Steve Swan and Roxy Lopez. Welcome.
Okay, thank you for taking my call. And there was a subject about sodium bicarbonate that you touched upon a couple of days ago, or it was maybe yesterday, about the pH levels in the blood. And is that something that's anti-cancerous? I'm sorry about my French, but yes, I am from Montreal, and yes, I am French.
So do you know anything about that, Steve? The sodium bicarbonate, is that what you said?
Yeah, I have heard that. That's I pretty much stick with what Dr. Clark had discovered, and I know there are people out there who are saying that they can cure cancer using baking soda. Sodium bicarbonate is pretty much baking soda. That they can cure cancer using that. I know there's a lot of people who believe it. It's not something that Dr. Clark ever espoused, but I know that there are people out there who are espousing it.
And how about cannabis oil, hemp oil, or THC oil? Not necessarily smoking a fatty each day, but using the oil in another way.
I don't really know anything about that either. It's not. I pretty much just focus on what Dr. Clark came up with, and that's not something that she ever got into.
Okay, and how about you, Rosie? You did hear about that.
It's Roxy, but yes, of course.
Sorry.
As a show host and on our website, we have multiple ideas. So, I really can't comment on that because it's my guests that come to the shows that really have the expertise of any of these uses, and so I just know what I do for my life and things that work for me personally, or for, let's say, my animals or my husband. But as far as the focus, like, for instance, I have a zapper here, and I haven't even tried it yet. Somebody sent me one to use, and I haven't even tried it. So I'm way behind here on what the uses are. But as far as using hemp oil or sodium bicarbonate or baking soda, I don't use either. But then again, I don't have cancer.
Okay, but you did go from worse to better.
No, I didn't ever have cancer, and I never went from worse to better on anything. I don't have cancer, sir.
Oh, I thought on the physical side you had problems.
Not me. It wasn't me. But I thank you for the call, though.
Yeah, no problem. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure. It's nice talking to you, Johnny. Okay, so there you have it. So, Steve, I'm with you. I don't. I understand that your studies are based on, obviously, Dr. Clark's work, and that's where your focus is, and I completely get it. And the work of Dr. Hulda Clark is out there big time, and what you've described with all the books that this woman wrote and all the studies that she did, what do you think is your favorite part about all of it? Like, what is something that in this work that you are doing? For instance, have you written a book?
No, I haven't. I've just been trying to get Dr. Clark's information out there. What amazes me is how successful the mainstream medical industry has been in vilifying Dr. Clark and her discoveries and her inventions and suppress and just completely ignoring it. A dozen years ago, she's written a number of books. She's had a large following. She started getting very popular, and then there was a concerted effort amongst the medical industry, the pharmaceutical companies, the research industry, doctors, calling her a nut, calling her a quack, calling her a charlatan, saying she's crazy. She doesn't. This woman is out there, sweet, sweet woman. She's just trying to do the best she can, a classically trained scientist, trying to help people, share her discoveries, and the whole world is coming down upon her. A dozen years ago, you could walk into any health food store or bookstore, and you could see her. You go to the health section, and her books would be right there. But now it's like she doesn't even exist. You never hear anybody talking about her anymore. There's still a lot of people, a lot of her followers who are using her stuff, who know that everything that she said is true and it all works. They're still there. But as far in the big scheme of things, compared to all the billions of people that there are, it's minuscule. The same people she used to work with at her clinic down in Mexico, she had doctors and dentists down there that they used to work with her and her patients. They're still doing it. The people who used to use her analytical device and do testing and things like that, they're still using it. The people who have the websites that are selling the supplements and the zappers and things like that, they're all still doing it. They're all still trying to get the information out to people. I think one of the problems was Dr. Clark was so wrapped up in her research and helping people that in order to get the word out there, you have to be a promoter also. And she just didn't have the time to be a promoter. So that's why I think it's languished. It just amazes me how effective the mainstream medical industry has been in suppressing everything. And I can see the mainstream media ignoring it and, sweeping it under the rug. But even the non-mainstream media, you don't hear anything in alternative talk radio either about Dr. Clark anymore. So I'm just trying to do what I can to let people know that there are still a lot of people who use this, that it works, and the books are out there, and anybody interested in being healthy should look into her information.
Well, just to let you know, and I agree with you, a lot of people that I come across that are working in the alternative, medical fields and really have some really good connecting evidence for cures and definitely for like cancers and the viruses and the pathogens and all the rest of it. I will say this, there are a lot of people who are familiar with the work because they wrote into me several times over the last year. I want you to know that, and wanted to know if we could get anybody to talk about Dr. Clark's work and talk about the zapper and talk about even, they've educated me a bit on all of this. And you're right. Dr. Clark didn't have time to advertise herself and put her, spend millions of dollars for commercial ads and build websites because that wasn't her work. So you're absolutely correct. A lot of these alternative doctors go completely unnoticed other than with their hand-to-hand combating, hand-to-hand with the public. Other than that, nobody knows they even exist, and that is unfortunate. So, I really do appreciate that you, I figured that's what you were doing, that you kind of stepped up and said, look, this worked for me, and you look into the work and so forth. And I think that you can build, and hopefully, Steve, hopefully you can build a network of individuals that you can now help through her work so that her work goes on, even though that she has passed on.
Yes, well, like you said before, I do have a website called drclarkconsultant.com, and what I did was she has so much information in her books. It does get a little bit confusing if you don't study it closely. So I set up a website and a consulting service for anybody who might want to use her protocols, who might not be real familiar with it, but might want a little assistance, consulting assistance as to what she put out there. And because she did so many updates to the information, that also makes it a little confusing. So, I'm just trying to do what I can to be able to help people and to promote this as well. Now, the end of her life is really a tragic story because she's this sweet little lady who's trying to help people. She's wrapped up in all of the research that she's doing. She's wrapped up in the clinic she has down in Mexico, trying to save the lives of people with cancer and AIDS and other terminal diseases. She's got the mainstream world coming down upon her, calling her crazy, calling her a nut. Don't listen to this person. And she's so focused on helping everybody else that I think she just let her own health go.
I was going to ask you about that, and no doubt that's what happened. Look, we're going to take one last break, and when we come back, let's talk about that, and let's talk about ways that we can get this woman's work out there more than it even is right now. I'm Roxy Lopez. This is The Truth Tonight. We'll be right back with Steve Swan. We are back with the last few moments that we have with Steve Swan. And Steve, it just isn't long enough. I mean, it's been absolutely amazing listening to your story and Dr. Clark. And I was going to guess as well that she worked so hard, night and day, 7 days a week, for the planet, for life. To free people's lives from disease. That she ended up, literally her work killed her. She worked herself to death, didn't she?
Well, I think she did. I mean, she had these terminally ill patients in her clinic, and she was all constantly monitoring them with her analytical device to make sure that the protocols were working for them. These people are on death's door. So she's doing everything she can to save their lives. She's keeping up with all the research that she was doing. And she's got the medical establishment is coming down on her. Everybody's saying, don't listen to this crazy woman. She didn't get out that much as far as promoting herself, but one thing she did like to go to was they had every year in California they had a Health Freedom Expo. And so she would go to that, but you could see, like, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, you could see her in the videos visibly deteriorating year after year after year, but she's just so caught up in helping other people that she's just ignoring her own health. I don't think she got enough exercise. She probably didn't get enough sleep. She probably didn't eat well. Eat correctly. She even remarked about it in one of the speeches she did at the Health Freedom Expo. I'm going to take some time out and work on some of my own problems here one of these days. But she was just so caught up in, especially the cancer. She was always, I guess that's part about being a scientist. When you're always finding out new things, you just want to keep going and find out more. And she had gotten to the point where she was talking about there being a correlation amongst 4 actual diseases involved with cancer. It's not just cancer, but there's also AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. She would go through a person's situation and say, once you've got close to 10 different parts of your immune system that are not functioning properly, well, that was her definition, that this is actually AIDS. And there was a correlation between cancer and AIDS, and also the HIV related with AIDS, and also there was something she was working on with somehow malaria was also involved in these things. So she says, I'm working on all these things, but I need to take time out to help myself, but she just never did. And then when she died, they said, well, Dr. Clark, this supposed person who's written all these books about curing cancer, she died from cancer. And so, I mean, there's a dispute about that. If you look at the death certificate, it doesn't say that she died from cancer, but there's other people out there that are promoting that she did die from cancer. So that was another thing that worked against her, that helped out the establishment to suppress her stuff, is they're making it widely known, although it's not true, but it may be true that she did have cancer. I don't know, but I think she died. She was 80 years old. I mean, she wasn't a young woman, but I think it was more neglect because she was so concerned with helping others. And I mean, it must have been a terrible burden for her to be able to try to do the right thing all of her life, and then have such a backlash against her by the ones who profit off the way the medical industry is set up.
Absolutely, you make so many good points, and in light of with the work that you're doing now, Steve, and getting her work out, I'd like to commend you for looking at something like this, and then you as well wanting to take it on, and even though you're not a doctor or a scientist, but you want to be able to at least give her work, carry on her work, and I think it's very commendable, very honorable, and in all reality, I have many Facebook pages, let's say, and blogs and this and that, blah, blah. And, it's sad because most people want to talk about the problem or how they're feeling so sick, and they give you ask them, how they're feeling, and they give the lists and lists and lists of their sicknesses and their psychoses and all the rest of it. But when to step up to the plate and really do something about it, it's very interesting that they wait to the last minute or whatever till they're so ill, or they go to, a doctor who charges them arm and a leg, where they have to spend every last dime they ever had towards the end of their life paying off this debt to these doctors and pharmacies that are just Band-Aids on the problem. It's really bad cultural, and it's all marketing. So I definitely stand beside you on this, and I definitely will promote you on our website. I will definitely get behind what you're doing with Dr. Clark's work, for sure.
Great. I thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on here tonight.
Oh, and I want you to come back. I definitely, we're booked quite a few shows out, but I definitely want you to come back, because I think we just hit the tip of the iceberg, and I think that there would be so many other questions that we can ask, like, for instance, the service that you have been providing, which is on your website, Dr. Clark drclarkconsultant.com, and I will make sure that information gets out, and I'll speak to you in the next couple of days, via email, if there's anything else that you want me to put in the articles and things like that we'll put out for you, that will stay out indefinitely and on YouTube. So I definitely stand beside you, and I'm glad that we had you on the show because I got to learn a little bit more about it, and I do find you to be a very compassionate man. I definitely pick up your vibe, and your words seem very authentic. So I definitely will. Our organization will stand with you and try to get the word out.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome. Any last-minute words? We've got a couple of minutes left.
Well, I wish, I'm trying to do what I can to promote this information. If there's other people out there, I hope that they would, if they're familiar with Dr. Clark, I wish they would do what they can do as well. It's something I don't have much money to work with. I'm doing this on a shoestring, trying to figure out what can be effective to get the information out there. If anybody wants to go, after Dr. Clark passed away, they set up a testimonial website for her. If anybody wants to go and read any of the testimonials, it's called In Memory of Dr. Hulda Cla.com. Dr. Clark's son had set up a business quite a few years ago selling the supplements and vitamins and herbs and things like that Dr. Clark recommended. And for all of the supplements and things that they sell, they used her analytical device to test each one to make sure that there's no toxins or pollutants or things like that in there. So that some of the purest products you can get would be from drclarkstore.com, and you'll see a lot of people there who used to be involved with her when she had her clinic in Mexico, and it'd be, even if you wanted to, when I had first sent you the email about for a story idea to promote Dr. Clark's information, there were a couple of people on there that you might want to contact as well to get someone else who could
sure.
talk about her. So if you wanted to follow that up too, you could try that.
I will absolutely follow that up. I mean, this is how it all works, and don't worry about the shoestring budget and all the rest of it, because we're all on a shoestring budget, and somehow we all make it to the next day, the next month, the next year. So, the more we unify, the more we pull together. It's just a beautiful thing. So I appreciate your work, and I'll definitely be contacting you, tomorrow, next day. We'll put this together. We'll put a little plan together, and definitely I just want to extend a big thank you for taking the time to be on the show, and have a great weekend, Steve Swan.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. And so that was Steve Swan. And again, you want to go to www.drclarkconsultant.com. Also, you just heard him, www.testimonyinmemoryofdrhuldaclark.com or drclarkstore.com. Or, of course, if you want to meet Steve Swan and see what services he provides, that's www.clarkupdates.com. So thankful, so grateful to have him on the show. What fabulous. And now I'm going to look into it. I'm going to cover this. I'm going to add him to the Truth Denied website as well. So, hey, I just want to thank everybody who actually has the mind to wrap around this. I want to thank everybody who actually takes responsibility for their own health. And I want to thank everybody who stands beside us as well, gets the word out for us. And, it gets very difficult because the majority of the crowds really just want to complain, and it gets really, really tough. But hey, even the complainers, one by one, end up starting to turn into somebody who is accountable for their own health, for their own activism, for their own everything. So one by one, we will all unify. You watch. We will all unify under one umbrella. We will take this planet back because we are 7 million strong. We are the majority. That is my belief system. We're in for a quantum leap here, folks. Humanity is going through the ride. We don't like it. We don't like change. And it's all good because it will change and it will be for the better. It's already changing. And that's where I stand on everything. So, hey, I'm the mother hen. I want all my babies to come home. Hey, have a great weekend. Again, you want to stay tuned for Sean David Morton, my buddy. He is the best, and he's always got a lot to say. Another, just great, man. I'm Roxy Lopez. Peace out.
No rules. No rules. No taboo topics. No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
These things, one of the things she found out was that if you find out what the source of the toxins and pollutants are and stop that from coming into your body will do a good job of clearing a lot of the toxins and pollutants out itself. But a lot of times it won't be able to do that completely, so sometimes other methods are needed to get the toxins and pollutants out of the body. And as far as getting rid of the foreign invaders in the body, she was very involved with herbs, using herbal remedies to exterminate things. And so she worked in her regular job doing research, and she also kind of had a side job of helping people with their ailments. So she built up quite a reputation around where she lived. She lived in Indiana. She was originally from Canada. But when she started doing her actual work after she got her doctorate, she was living in Indiana. And so word got around the area she was living that she could cure ailments, cure diseases. So she had a lot of people coming to her. Her first patient she saw as a consultant was way back in 1963, and she just kept doing it and doing it and doing it for years and built up quite a name for herself. Eventually, because she was not a medical doctor, but she knew that she could help people, she was probably a little concerned about being prosecuted for practicing medicine without a license. So she ended up moving to California, and I think her intention was to eventually go across the border into Mexico and set up a clinic there. So she helped a lot of people. She continued doing all of her research, acting as a scientist, working as a scientist, getting better and better at it, helping people cure their ailments and diseases. But what happened was in 1988, she made her most important discovery. Now, you mentioned earlier that something about RF radio frequencies causing diseases, but that's not what that's not what happened. What she discovered was the RF, the radio frequencies, the RF weren't causing diseases. She discovered that everything that's in existence, whether it's dead or alive, animate, inanimate, everything produces and emits its own radio frequency or a range of radio frequencies. The smaller things are, the lesser number of frequencies they have, and the larger things are, the larger the range of frequency is. And so she came up with an invention for being able to detect radio frequencies and being able to figure out what the substance
to me. The sloppier one is doing this seems a direct measure of the captivity to it. Those eating GMO foods, taking prescriptions and over-the-counter drugs, not detoxing and not limiting their environmental contacts and doing nothing to detox their skin seem almost hopelessly captive and lost. The exceptions I have run into statistically has got to be astronomical considering the numbers of people I talk to. In that spectrum, from the fully blind to the fully awake, those capable of acting to further awaken seems in direct measure to how clean they are keeping their bodies. And the talking of so-called legal drugs seems to be where the kill switch to action awareness lies. In other words, the content of the chemtrails and legal drugs and GMO foods clearly seem to me, at least directly and deliberately, connected to the quote-unquote agendas. The listener asks me, are you aware of anyone actively researching these connections? You meet a lot of people, Roxy. Surely you must be aware of the connections and drawing the same conclusions? It is no accident that all three of these areas are being forced upon the public in a big way, like payloads being delivered. So my guest today, this is perfect. By the way, I just received this letter today, so this is so perfect for the show. My guest today is Steve Swan, another controversial individual. Stephen Swan has been studying and using the discoveries, inventions, and protocols of Dr. Hulda Cla for many years to keep himself healthy. He has also used them to cure his own asthma and his own psoriasis. And Swan has a consulting service for anyone wishing assistance in using Dr. Clark's protocols to cure their own ailment or diseases. And Dr. Clark is going to, Stephen Swan is going to, maybe he's the reincarnation of, because Dr. Hulda Cla passed away, but he's going to fill us in on who Dr. Hulda Cla is, what her amazing health discoveries are. He's going to fill us in on all the blanks and why he decided to become a consultant using Dr. Clark's methods. And so without any further ado, very happy to have you on the show. Welcome, Stephen Swan.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice letter. Dr. Clack was so terribly concerned about all of the toxins that everybody is exposed to. We're just inundated with all kinds of toxins that compromise the immune system and allow all kinds of foreign invaders to come into the body and cause all kinds of diseases. And that was a very appropriate letter.
Thank you. And I thought, what a synchronicity, you know. But I go with that. Now, I noticed that with some of what Dr. Cla did, I noticed that she detected RF, radio frequencies as a poison for people. How long ago was her work in action? In other words, what were the years that she practiced?
Well, she, we referred to her as Dr. Clark, but she wasn't, whenever anyone's referred to as a doctor, you automatically think of a medical doctor. But she was not a medical doctor. She was a classically trained scientist. She did scientific research her whole life. She earned her bachelor's degree in doing scientific research in the biological field. She earned her master's degree, and she earned her PhD, her doctorate, way back in 1958. And so she did that all her life, doing all kinds of scientific research in the biological fields, cellular biology, the physiology of things, how living things function, what things have different effects on how living things function, and so on. And so she had a very strong basis for all of the research she was doing, and I think she should go down in history as one of the greatest scientists that ever lived because of the discoveries she made, which are actively being suppressed by the mainstream pharmaceutical industry, the mainstream medical industry. She made some tremendous discoveries that have the potential of positively affecting the life of every person alive. After she got her degrees, she worked in scientific research for a while, doing government-funded investigations. And she also, being involved in the biological sciences, she was interested in her own health, staying healthy, and the health of her family and friends. And so she did a lot of research into what causes ailments, what causes diseases, and helping people out. And she pretty much came up with the concept that she determined that most diseases are simply a combination of two factors: an overabundance of toxins and pollutants coming into the body and compromising the immune system, which in turn would allow foreign invaders, bacteria, viruses, parasites, all kinds of different things to be able to colonize in the body and form different, start different types of ailments and diseases. So, because she was interested in curing
The American Freedom Radio Network proudly presents, live from Phoenix, Arizona, The Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here for topics you won't hear on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, Morgellons disease, and much more. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
Good evening, everyone. It is the Truth Tonight Talk Radio. I am your host, Roxy Lopez. And today, oh boy, this is going to be something. We've got a mixture of energy around this show today. I'll bring our guest on in a moment. And I want to read all of you a letter that a listener wrote into us, and this is also going to have very much to do with the show. We have been getting all of your emails, by the way, with your questions on Facebook and Twitter, etc. And some of you who are going to be calling in. So this is going to be a tremendous informational show, and so just stick around, stick with us through the breaks. Here's the letter I got. It's interesting. I'm going to read it to y'all. It says, in Washington State, indeed most of the western U.S. and even into B.C., Canada, continues to be hammered by massive chemtrail dumps. Not just trails, these are massive dumps all at once like a big blob that then smears out over the whole state. Dozens of them in a day and day out. Day in and day out, sorry. The satellite clearly shows also that what they are doing, and shows how they smear out into the jet streams and prevailing winds and leading winds off of the front. The cult of silence and denial runs deep and wide through all of the officialdom, from government to the morons who read the weather, etc. The grip those behind this have on the culture is far-reaching. The numbers of those who remain ignorant and blind and in fear of what their own eyes and minds are telling them, contrasted with the numbers awakening and awake, is incredibly out of balance. Now, this is a listener who wrote it. Now, this is where it really plays into to our guest on the show today. He says, I see a clear pattern. This is, again, the listener. Those not taking any prescription drugs or eating GMO foods and taking measures to detox daily and measures to protect themselves from direct skin contact with the environment seem to be the most awake.
Was just based on what the radio frequencies it was emitting. So she could test a person using her invention with radio frequencies to see exactly what the toxins were that were in the body, exactly what the foreign invaders were that were in the body, and she could also pinpoint the exact locations in the body where these toxins and foreign invaders were colonized. And so, and her invention, this opened up a whole new field of analytical research, being able to detect substances and figure out what is causing the diseases and how to cure them. But you know, the way the medical industry is set up, it's a lot of it is guided by the large pharmaceutical companies, and you know they make a lot of money, and they don't want to hear about new inexpensive ways of being able to cure things naturally by removing the toxins and by exterminating the foreign invaders. So there was a big concerted effort to suppress a lot of the evidence that she was presenting. Now, she was a scientist, and she knew that the way things are traditionally done is if a new scientific discovery is made, then it's put out for peer review for all the other scientists, and clinical trials are done, double-blind studies where you have a control group and you have another group, and one group will get the actual substance that's supposed to help, and the other group will get a placebo, and they go on for years and years, and the group getting the placebo, they may die from whatever the ailment is that they're studying, and the other group may get some benefit from it. Well, she didn't want to have to wait all this time. She made these important revolutionary discoveries. She wanted to get that information into people's hands as quickly as possible. So she figured the best way to do that would be to write books. Just put everything, all of her discoveries, she would just put them into books and put it out there into the general public so people could learn and benefit and cure themselves. So after she made this discovery in 88, she went a couple of years and did all kinds of research and using this new method of analytical research that she had done. And then in the early 90s, she started publishing books. And the disease that concerned her the most was cancer, because so many people were dying from cancer. So she wrote a book in 1993 called The Cure for All Cancers. And in the same year, she was also very concerned about people dying from AIDS. So she wrote a book in 1993, same year, called The Cure for